Hello and welcome to the McDonald's sessions. Today I have the living legend, Todd Chandler. Okay, welcome to the McDonald's sessions. Today I have Todd Chandler with me, and we are at McDonald's again. I'm back.
He's back.
So, Todd, we've known each other, 4 or 5 years?
Long time.
Yeah, but I do not really know anything about you. You're kind of a mystery. I know that you have a good laugh. And I know that you're out at Lawrence a lot, and I've watched all your videos. You're definitely one of the reasons I started doing the videos.
Thanks.
I think I was driving up here, and I kind of think if I would think of, and you might know someone else, but I think of you'd be like kind of the father of the YouTube videos for Kansas City, and then with Jason. And I think if there was like Mount Rushmore that I could be on there with you guys.
Oh, totally.
But there would definitely be.
Totally.
I think you two, and maybe me, and then I don't know who else. So if you think you're on the Mount Rushmore, let me know. But definitely you two, so we might have just a two-person Mount Rushmore, but I mean, I watched so many of your videos. I don't think that we do them at all the same, but I always liked the story that you had, and
Thanks.
There's like so many videos that I would watch, and it would make me want to do the race. Then I did them, and maybe I kind of wish I did.
That was dumb. Why did he make that seem so cool? It wasn't good at all.
You seemed way more fun. You had your little, used to have, I don't know if you still have it, but you had like a board with your medals and bibs and stuff in front of it, and I just thought it was a creative way to do it, and then I did it completely different. So anyway, it was always fun to watch your videos, and hopefully you can get some more videos out.
And I mean, it was just driving here to meet you. I was like, I can't remember like when we met. It feels like I've just always known you. Like I think it was kind of such a gradual process of seeing you at different races and interacting with them. Yeah.
Okay, but I definitely don't know your history, so let's get into that.
Okay.
So what did you do sports-wise in high school, or did you do anything?
Yeah, I did not. I was not athletic at all in high school, and it really took me a while to get comfortable with the fact of calling myself an athlete or athletic. In high school, I was in band, I was in theater, I was on the freshman football team, and band practices started to conflict with the Thursday night freshman football games, and I talked to a coach about it. He's like, Chandler, you're going to make a much better musician than you will an athlete. See ya.
What?
I was just thrilled he knew my name, so that was great.
What instrument did you play?
A tuba.
Do you still play any instruments?
I don't. And within the running community, one of the runners, his daughter plays tuba, and she's like amazing. She's actually working on her PhD and play, and so it's been kind of fun. But I gave it up when I went to college. And I didn't run much through college. It really wasn't until like fairly old guy in the 90s. I lived like 3.5 miles away from where I worked. I was working at Purdue University in Indiana, and we only had one car at the time, and a buddy of mine bike commuted to work, and I thought that would be kind of a cool idea. So I got a bike, got a strap to put my suit on, and I could bike into work and then take a shower there and then bike home. Yeah. Well, I started the habit of biking in with 2 suits, and then I'd run home, and then the next day I'd run in, and then I'd bike home. And so I was getting to be in great shape. I was doing 3.5 miles morning and night, commuting in, and a buddy of mine was going to run the Chicago Marathon. So Chicago was 2 hours away from Lafayette, Indiana, where we were. And I was like, yeah, all right, that sounds fun. Actually, my first reaction was, I can't do that. I only do like 3.5 miles a day. And he was like, dude, you do it every single day. You're going to be amazed at how quickly you can add mileage. I went up to 6-mile run, up to 9-mile run. It was really easy. And I was like, it is pretty easy. So I signed up for it. Well, then once I got beyond like 13 miles, it got really hard. And I almost didn't go up to the race. And he's like, you already paid for it, like going up there to do it. So my first race ever was a marathon. I didn't start with a 5K and work my way up. I just
the Chicago Marathon?
The Chicago Marathon.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that was back in '95.
Yeah. So, what made you
It is
actually
crazy.
What
Yeah.
makes you actually start running? Was it just convenience, or like what? Like, what was the actual thinking behind that?
It was health. It was just trying to be healthy. And I mean, I was kind of post college, was working hard. My eating habits have never been stellar. And I just trying to keep that weight off, started doing that. And then it became a nice way to support my cheeseburger and beer habit of making sure that I could afford to take in those things by running it off. And I ran that Chicago Marathon and had a blast of time. It was one of the most motivating, inspiring days. I mean, up to that point, I had never run more than 19 miles. I was totally didn't think I could finish that race because I tried to run a farther distance, like 21 miles, and I couldn't do it as the training. My buddy was like, it'll be different when you get there. To this day, the pasta dinner the night before got me extra miles. The caffeine the day of got me some extra miles. The 18,000 other runners that were running that everybody wants you to finish that and do that, and then all the people cheering in the crowd. And I got to about 19 miles and hit that wall and zombie walked it in from there. But it was so cool to finish that very first one in such a big city marathon like that. Have you done a big city marathon? Kansas City's been the biggest. Yeah, like a Chicago, New York, Boston, some of those that just it's a much bigger hoopla. Even like the Nashville, not Nashville, Memphis, the St. Jude's, just kind of a bigger vibe than what the Kansas City one has. Yeah.
So once you got finished, were you really like hurt?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did you think either like right after that you wanted to keep running, or did that kind of?
No, I was pretty much kind of like one and done at that point. I mean, within my running circles, we kind of. I feel this, that you've got people that do marathons as a bucket list. They do it and then they're done with it. And then you've got people that do marathons and go on and on and on. And to me, there's a slight distinction in that. If you've done it as a bucket list, then you're a guy who's run a marathon. If you're a person who's run a couple of them, then you're a marathon runner.
Yeah.
And so it's a subtle little distinction, but at that point, I was a guy who had run a marathon. I didn't have any intention of doing it. 10 years went by before I did it again, and I was kind of off and on with my running habits, mainly kind of 3 miles here and there, 3 miles 3 to 4 times a week, and just kind of running. And friend of mine was going to do the marathon up in Des Moines, and I was like, it's been 10 years. I'd kind of like to do that again. And so I started training and ramping up for that and did that. And that one really hooked me. And that's when I was like, I want to do the 50 marathons in 50 states, and kind of started chasing after that.
So you ran the Chicago Marathon and the Des Moines Marathon. Did you run anything? Like any races shorter than that?
No,
You're like, marathon, nothing. It's not even worth my time to get out of the bed with that 26.2.
That was not the mindset, but the result was essentially the same. The mindset was just really, it wasn't like I just wasn't a racer. Like, and so even back to that, like I didn't grow up as an athlete, or I was never competitive. It was never about the race. It was more about the event or the experience. And so the fact that 5Ks and 10Ks just never really appealed to me. It wasn't really, and so I mean, kind of that journey just continues. I did that one, and then I did my third marathon was in DC, and it was a fantastic experience. It was miserable. It was a 13-mile course, so it was an out and back twice, and it was on the George Washington Parkway. There was a paved trail. It was nice. It was having kind of those bigger city experiences. This one where there was like no crowd out there cheering it on. It was just a few people kind of running it. And over time, I thought I had a IT band issue that popped up on this one, and it was miserably painful. If the race had been better supported, I would have dropped, but I was out there and I had to get back to the finish line, and so the only way to do that was to keep going.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, I hobbled in. I was third from last in that race. I joked immediately afterwards I didn't finish last, but I saw who was. And it was the one time my kids came out to see me. First time, I guess, my kids came out to see me, and I was an hour later than what they expected me to be done. So they were walking out on the trail to find me and walked it in with me. So, and from that point, I stopped, and then years went by again, and we were in Kansas City at that point, and a friend talked me into running the Kansas City half. So that was kind of finally jumping down to I'd done a 10-mile race prior to that, and then, but in that marathon, half marathon, where you hit that fork where the half marathoners go that way and the marathoners go that way. I was a half marathoner and I went that way, and I was like, I didn't like that feeling. I was like, I've always gone that way. And so it was just kind of disappointing for me to actually take that on that way.
I've never felt like that. Every time I've run a marathon and I saw the half marathon, I'm like, oh, I should have done that. Or
the regret's always gone the other way?
Yeah. I mean, like the Kansas City Marathon specifically, at least now the course is you run right by the start or the end line.
Yeah.
And then you have to keep going for another 13 miles. And I'm always like, I shouldn't have done that. Or the Garmin Marathon in Olathe.
Yeah.
The same way where you're like, you do the split and no. I always wish that I just did the half. So that's just different thinking, I think.
Well, I think I'm getting to a point in my life. I run with a group that we do a lot of go to different places to do races, which I love. It's great to get out and about and experience these things. And I almost always sign up for the longest distance available. And it's been this trip I took to Portland this summer was fantastic. They had a 50K and a 50 miler. I signed up for the 50K and I was like, that's so much nicer. Just take the shorter distance and you get to enjoy yourself a little bit more and have more fun with it.
I think the best thing about that too is you're not the last person. Even if I think in my last 50K, the 50 mile, a couple 50 milers passed me, but still, there were still a ton of people still out there.
Yeah.
I do kind of feel guilty sometimes when I would be third from last person and they're, the finish line is being broken down already. And it's like, I'm sorry that I'm, making you guys stay here. So that's like in the 100K that I'm doing. I'm excited about that because there's still 100 milers out there. So that'll be good. Okay. So you got 3 marathons in, the half marathon in. How did you get from there to being, like a Trailhawk, the Trailhawk president? Like, what made you start running on trails, or who started making you run on trails? Like, something happened.
Yeah, no, it was, most of my stories start with, I either heard on a podcast or a buddy of mine and I were talking, and a buddy of mine and I were talking. We were actually in New Hampshire on vacation, our family's vacation together, and we were hiking up Mount Washington. And he and I became entranced by this idea of a long-term bet. We had just read an article about these economists that had made this 10-year bet and that they had paid it off. And we thought that was so cool to try to think about the future and try to assess what would happen. And so we had this whole day of hiking, and we threw out a bunch of different ideas, and we really started to drift into this territory of how great would it be to make a bet on something we could control. He was... we stayed with him and his wife when I ran the DC marathon. So he was there when everything broke down. And he's a big CrossFitter. And so where we landed on this is we came up with this bet called the New Hampshire Compulsion. And we wrote it all up and put it all together. And basically within 10 years, I had to run 50 marathon or greater distances in a race. And at that point, I had run 2 more marathons, so I'd had 5 under my belt, and they counted. So I really had to do 45 more in 10 years, and I was still on this wanting to do 50 marathons in 50 states kind of format. His bet was he had to finish in the top 5% of his age group for the CrossFit Games. And we could both win the bet, and the payoff was, if I won, then he would travel to my city, take me out for a nice dinner, make a speech in my awesomeness, and deliver a reward for me. And then same for him. If he won his, then we could do that. And he felt like he had the better side of the bet because he just had to do it once, and he'd win. I had to do 45 things in order to win. I felt like I had the better thing because I had total control over it. He had to, his impacted everybody else. He had to outperform everybody else. So if everybody else did a great job, he had to be better than them, and you wouldn't really know that going into it. Took him about 4 years, I think, to finally get it achieved. I wouldn't take it on. All that to say, as I leading up to that, one of the fifth marathon, I think it was the fourth or fifth marathon that I run was the Pikes Peak Marathon, because another buddy of mine I was telling him how I wanted to run the 50 in 50 states, and he always wanted to do Pikes Peak Marathon. And that's on trail up to the top of the mountain and back down. And so we started training out at Wyandotte County on the trails out there. And that's when I got involved in the Trail Nerds, ran the 20-mile Summer Waco, and was like, this is incredible. This is fantastic. And that's when I was hooked. And then as part of the New Hampshire compulsion bet, I had a clause in there that I got credit for every 25 miles and longer races. I was already starting to think about doing 50Ks, 50 milers. So like a 50K counted as one, but a 50 miler counted as two. So I didn't have to run a full marathon twice in order for it to count.
So then somewhere in there you decided I'd run a 100-miler and get credit for 4?
Right, exactly. And that's actually when I finally crossed the finish line, was I had finished up with a 100-miler, so it was really nice. So yeah, since then it's just been a great journey, and I've finished 300 milers. I've DNF'd 2 of them. I've got a long list of DNFs, and I DNF'd a 200 miler and was going to attempt to do another one at the Katy Trail. I didn't get a chance to tell you this beforehand. It just last night, found out it got canceled.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm kind of bummed by that.
I didn't know that.
This is late breaking news.
I saw it on Ultra Sign Up and I thought that was crazy. You know, they're doing one. Ottawa's doing one that's like a 200 miler. It's like a part of the spring. You know, they do it in fall and spring, and there's a spring one where I think it's going to go on the Flint Hills Trail one way, and then so you could look into that.
I will look into it. The notion of so I've loved the journey of and this really, you know, I started out as marathons, but for people who are runners who are starting out, when you go from a 10K, 5K, half marathon to a marathon, nutrition becomes critical. You can run a half marathon and not have to take in any calories. And there are some that can run a marathon and not take any calories, but really your body depletes all of your energy stores within the distance time of a marathon. So you've got to get good at bringing in calories. Well, then to go from a marathon to a 50K, it's a little bit more training. That's very doable. That's an easy transition to make. Up to 50 miles is another big jump, because then you've got the fatigue of the muscles to start to set in. And so that 50 mile or 100K are kind of tie into it. Well, then you get in a 100 miler distance and the fatigue really starts to play a role into it. But when you get into 200 miles, now you've got to factor in sleep. I don't think you could go 48, 72 hours without taking in some kind of sleep at that standpoint. And so that's kind of that next territory of how do you do that multi-day thing. Yeah.
So did you do runs where you trained like that? Would like run, sleep in your car?
Yep.
I figured that's. I remember you had your project.
Yep.
Where you could sleep in your car, so that's how you did it.
Yep. Yeah, and so just 3 weeks ago, I went and camped in New Franklin, Missouri, the Katy Roundhouse, a fantastic campground, and it's right on the Katy Trail. So Friday night, I pulled in Friday night. It was after dark. It was 8 o'clock. I got my 2-runner camping thing all set up, and then I went for a 10-mile run over to Boonville, a little bit and back up, and finished up about 11:30ish at night, and then went to sleep for like 4 hours, and then got up and then ran 40 miles the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you say that you're always like kind of challenged by other people to do it, but do you have any other like underlying reasons why you run? Like, do you run to clear your mind, or do you feel like you have something to prove to yourself? Like, what's your reason that you like this 200 mile that you were training for? Like, what's the reason for that besides just to run?
So that very first marathon was the most motivating. Like the high you get at the end of that race, where you're like, everybody, it was like, I didn't think I could do that, and I did it. It's just kind of a really cool feeling. And after I'd finished my first 100 miler, I don't know, I felt invincible. Like arguments come up at work or silly things happen. You're like, run 100 miles, I can handle this. Like the stress of life just becomes a little bit smaller, because you're like, it's not that big a deal. So I don't know that I have a specific thing to call, but I really like that feeling of doing hard things and accomplishing that. this is just yesterday at work. We were talking about some big projects that we're working on, and our CEO was talking about things, and he shared that Theodore Roosevelt quote about the man in the ring. You know, it's the hard toil, and it's whether you win or lose, it's the adventure that goes on it. And I was pretty nervous about this 200-miler coming up because I'm not feeling as well trained as we pretty much always go into races feeling like we're not trained enough, right?
Yeah.
It's rare that like, I've got this, I'm totally trained and ready to happen.
I think if you feel like that maybe, I mean, for me, I'd be nervous. Like I feel like that at like a 10K sometimes where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of motivating for me, where I feel like, I think some people will say respect the distance. I think that's part of it too. But yeah, I've never went into, especially like an ultra or a marathon, and been like, I got this, I'm gonna for sure complete it. I think that's why I like it, is because the same thing where you're saying, I'm not sure I can do this. When in those longer races, I think every time I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this or want to do this. I mean, you can get over that hump, and then you see the finish line. It's like, it's the best feeling.
Right, yeah. I think that's the big thing that drives it, and a lot of my running friends are proud of the fact that they've never had a DNF. I've got 10 big ones, and I'm proud of every one of them. I regret some of them, and I feel like I could have done them differently in some ways, but I've learned so much from it. And part of that, of trying something that was beyond my grasp and not quite being able to get there, was a huge learning thing. So I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, and I also think almost every race will say, like, this sucks, why did I do this? And I mean, that's why I did this, because I knew it was going to be hard and I wanted to overcome something. So I think that's a big part of it too, is just that overcoming that. I mean, if you've never done a race where you're 100% sure that you're going to make it and you made it, then I mean, that's the best feeling. Then you should run further, pretty much.
Right.
So do you have a favorite race that you've done out of all these runs?
Yeah, I think there's so many variables that play into that I have a lot of favorites, and you hate to say, well, I don't know that I have a favorite, but Vermont will always be a special place in my heart. That was my first 100-miler, and it's a full loop. I guess saying that, you don't end up back where you started, so it's a point to point, but it kind of has a loop element to it. Maybe you do. It doesn't matter. But you run through like 60 private properties on it. It was just gorgeous. The covered bridges, extremely well supported. It's kind of one of the old school, or one of the original batch of 100-mile races, and so it's got that good vibe about it. Black Canyon 100K. I think 100K is a great distance, and I've only done 2 of them. I should do more of them. The Black Canyon, Aravapa running does such a great job with it, and that one was point to point. That one was really cool for me because I had major struggles at one point. I got dehydrated, and I had to spend like 45 minutes in an aid station. I was running it to get a qualifying time for Vermont, and I had blown that, and so I wasn't going to be able to do it, so my race goals changed a little bit, but I recovered, and I finished pretty strong, and I came into the last aid station, and they were like, you only have like 3.2 miles left to go. And I'm like, are you serious? Is this like one of those, like, and they're like, no, that's serious. Like, and I was like, if I hurry up, I can do it in under 17 hours instead of, I missed the 16-hour one, but I was like, this is great. And I was passing people left and right in that last 3 miles. So that felt pretty good. And it was just a well-supported race.
Yeah. So besides racing, how did you get into the YouTube thing? How did you get into filming the races and filming like your experience? Because I mean, I don't know for sure, but I don't know if people at least hear that we're doing that when you started. So what made you do that?
I've just always loved cameras and editing. I love editing more so than I love filming, and so I love the editing mindset. I love figuring out how you tell a story out of that. And so I mean, I was a kid that I had a Super 8 camera, and you couldn't do much editing then because it was just kind of splicing stuff together, but we would try to tell stories or map that out. Then when we very first got married, had one of the JVC cassette camcorder things that carried around and did some stuff with, and then got into more filming with SD cards and such. And so when the kids were young, I did a lot of filming and putting together fun videos that way. And then as the software got so easy to be able to make it attainable to be able to do it, so I had an old YouTube channel that's more family oriented stuff that kind of has some things. In early days, it was kind of fun because I was out there doing a few things, and like Ford noticed that and kind of, I hate to use the term influencer, but was like, hey, we'd like to give you this Ford Flex for a week so you could do a video about it. And so I was driving a Mini Cooper at the time, and I did a Ford Flex versus the Mini Cooper video that is just cheesy, and I go back and look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so horrible. But I was loving running, and I was doing filming on other stuff, and so I just started to combine the two. And the early days when I was doing a lot of Trail Nerd races, it was much more of a talk to the camera afterwards, and here's kind of the race recap of what took place and scoring each of the different elements of the race.
Yes, I remember that. You'd be like the swag, and you'd be, here's the shirt that I got, here's the medal, and here's whatever else you got. So yeah, I definitely remember you had your rundown of things that you would rate in them. So I definitely remember. And
I had a race board that has the map of the states that I've done races in, and I need to update that because I've got Oregon now, which I didn't have before, and like all the medals and such. And that's in my workshop at my house. I had it in my garage for the longest time, and that was a lousy place to film because it was noisy, it was hot. If you were it was totally uncontrolled. This summer, one of the things I've been working on is we've built a barn. We own some land up near Smithville, and I'm really excited to turn that into more of a studio space to be able to start to craft some things and put it together to do more of those narrated things.
Yeah, I enjoyed those, so I'm not saying you have to get back to that because I don't think I would like it if someone told me what I should film. So, but I did enjoy them. I mean, part of it is a lot of the races that you would review are ones that you've already done probably. So, but yeah, I like those. So and you do like pretty much a race every week, right? Yeah. And so how do you find that right balance of going back to do a race you did last year versus trying a new race? I always think about that, especially there's some races where the races are in the same trail, like the same area. Yeah. So I always wonder, like, do I really need to film like what it looks like? Because that's kind of my goal when I'm filming, is I want to show what it was like for me as like a normal, I feel like I'm just a normal person, and then what it like looked like. What did the trail look like? What did the scenery look like? And like, what is the crowd level and stuff like that? So then if I do the same race again, I don't, like this weekend, I just edited a race, and it's it's on the Indian Creek Trail, which is run a million times. It was the same race I've run like 2 or 3 times already with my dog. So I'm trying to figure out like how to make it different. And part of it just isn't different. It's the same. It's still me. I'm kind of the same. Right. I film the same way every time. So I just kind of hope that maybe different people are watching it, or maybe I will learn something different myself. I mean, I feel like from year to year, I'm a lot different person, so maybe things are different. I have a different camera. I try to bring my drone sometimes to show that. But I do feel like sometimes maybe I am. I think we were talking about it before. Sometimes I don't really have anything to say when I'm filming it. Sure. So sometimes I'm not saying I'm going through the motions, but I am. There are different levels of videos. Like I'm not like saying that they're all my kids they're all my favorites. There's definitely videos where, and then the funny thing is, the videos that sometimes I don't care about are the ones that a lot of people watch. So I'm never gonna come on the video and say I don't care about this race, because I mean every race has like a good charity partner.
You wouldn't have signed up for it if you didn't care about it.
Well, sometimes I am just trying to get distance, but
I just need a training run.
Yeah, I mean
this one was nearby. Yeah,
that definitely happens. Or it's just one that I'm like have a habit with. I mean, and there was a lot of times where I was running with like Katie or Sydney, or I was running with people, and I don't really run with them as much anymore. Like, either Katie's going faster, Sydney's running with Rex. So like, I found different people. Like I ran Lewisburg. First time ever, I forgot my battery in my GoPro. And I ran with a new person that had never run a 5K before, so that was fun. Nice. And of course, I didn't have my camera to film it, so we could talk about it. Sure. But It is hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you ran like Wyco again and filmed it, wouldn't you have kind of a hard time saying different things that you already haven't said?
Yeah, and so one of the that triggered so many different thoughts. So Wandering Wolves, I really like that as a race, and this was just the second year that they did it, and so I ran that, and I made a reference while I was running it back to last year on the same portion, and I was hoping to be able to go back and lift footage from that to go back to. And I didn't. What I remembered that I had footage-wise wasn't there, and so like that comment's kind of unusable in the edit piece because it was like I feel a lot better at this point in the race than I did last year when I was really exhausted, and so then the other piece of that is part of this journey, and particularly loving the editing aspect of it so much more than the filming piece of it has been I've had the good luck or pleasure to film some races where I'm not even running them. So like I went down and filmed the Ozark Trail 100, which was great because I was partnered up with the race director and kind of got to go to all the aid stations that crew doesn't necessarily get to go to. Last year at Havens I filmed that, and so it was nice to be able to jump around and catch.
Yeah.
And it's more about the race and the other runners than it is about my story with that, which I love. You can get some drone footage, you can get different camera angles, and so that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, and I like Jason. He always does his story. He talks to people like as he's going by, like total strangers and stuff. And I don't really do that.
Right.
Like I think, like there's a lot of people that I'm running by that don't even know that I'm filming because I try to not film with people around.
Sure.
I'm shy.
Yeah.
So I don't really like to draw attention to myself like that I'm filming, even though, I mean, at the starting and you're talking, it's kind of hard.
Right.
But I also make sure that's just me. Like, he'll do it where he has it out and people are waving in the background.
Yeah.
You don't really ever see that in my videos because I just don't film that way. But yeah, I mean, it is, I do film mostly from my perspective only, but I have done it a few times where it's been about the other people I've been running with. So I like that too, but it's just harder because, you know, you have to, I don't know, you just have to have a different mindset. And I definitely am out there and by myself, and it is nice to talk to this fictitious person.
Right.
Like these people that I think that are watching, and I don't even know who's watching
Sure.
half the time. I mean, I definitely will see people running, I mean, just on my regular runs and say hi to me, and I don't have any clue who they are. So it's cool and it's also very intimidating at the same time because I know I'm not, you know, like I could be the third to last person in a race. Yeah. And they're like, why are you filming running when you're not very good at it? So
one of my favorite shots is to set the camera down, go back, and then run towards it because it's steady. You don't have the bounciness of it. You get a great shot of the whole time. And so occasionally that'll work into my race. And my stepfather was like, the only way I figured you got that shot was you had to set the camera down, go back, and then run towards it. I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I got it. He goes, aren't you running a race?
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to finish first. I'm just trying to get it finished.
I mean, there's been a few races I think where you had like you tied something to a tree, like your GoPro to a tree or something. Yeah. Like that really took some time. Yeah. And it looks good. And like if you haven't filmed, you don't even know like how long that took. Or, I mean, there's a lot of shots that people do that I'm just like that had to take forever.
Well, and some of my close running buddies that I run fairly, so the crewing pacing aspect of it, to me, when you get into over 50 miles, it becomes a team sport. You can do it by yourself. I've done 100 miler by myself, but it's so much more enjoyable when you have a crew and pacing with you. And I often will, take 2 cameras or something. I'll say, shoot what you can with this. There's no obligation, no focus on it, but it's kind of funny to see what some of the things they come up with.
That's what I was wondering. Like you probably get the camera back and this is interesting. I never would have thought about filming that.
Yeah. And so that's just great. And when I do talk to the camera, it's kind of funny. I hadn't really thought through this whole piece of it, but I think I'm talking to myself more than that fictional person out there. Because when I'm sitting there editing, I'll be watching myself and seeing how stupid I sound or what I did on it. And so trying to think, talking to future Todd helps me kind of have the right voice or what I want to say to this. Yeah. And even now that I've had videos out there for probably 10 years. I should look it up to kind of see what that is. But to go back and watch some of that older stuff, I shake my head, or sometimes I'm like, that was kind of a cool thing. I should do that again. I mean, kind of like what you've done with these McDonald's sessions, is capturing points in time and different people, to be able to have that history to go back to is kind of a cool thing to be able to do. And then that adds perspective to refine it for that next time about, here's something I want to tell that Todd down in the future. And if other people like watching it too, that's great.
Well, speaking of that, do you have any advice for, I mean, it could be any kind of runner, like a beginning runner, or someone that's like thinking of running their first 100K, 100 miler? Like, do you have any advice for them?
Well, it depends a lot on the runner. So people who are getting into the ultra running area, certainly I would say get nutrition and get pain management handled, like, because you're going to experience some of that. And so how do you understand how to deal with calf muscles when they cramp up and those kinds of things? For the 100K, you're certainly getting into that. You've got so much experience and with that. I think getting a coach is a great thing to be able to do, to have somebody that knows your plan and knows what you set up to do to be able to accomplish. Can be really helpful to have somebody professional who can talk through those things with you.
Yeah. Okay, I think we covered everything that I had on my list. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to go over?
No, I think the cool thing about running to me is the lack of expense to be able to get out there and do it. The community in Kansas City, we're just so lucky and so grateful. I just read an article a couple weeks ago, a friend sent me in the New York Times, about running clubs and how they're coming up. And I was like, I counted like 5 running clubs in Kansas City that I've actively participated in over time. And I'm very extroverted. I love hanging out with people, and so that works well for me. But even for more introverts, I think getting connected with a group that feels good when you show up and gets you out the door and gets you engaged in it is good. As cold weather's coming, I think just getting outside is really important. So I've just been trying to do that on a more regular basis too. So that's a big thing. That's it.
And I think I've said this on a ton of videos, but one of the coolest parts about running is the encouragement that you get. You just don't get like encouragement really in your normal life. Like you don't get people clapping for you, and it's just a good feeling, especially when you know, like, not a 5K when you don't really deserve it, but
well, I was going to say, because I think you're right. I think the longer the distance is, the stronger the encouragement becomes.
Yeah.
Because people are like more appreciative of what you're out there doing, and it's less about the order and who finishes first. 5K, it's very much who finishes first. 200 meters sprint, it's very much who finishes first.
And I think most people too that are at ultras have either run them or seen them enough to understand like what you're going through, and what, like, that day isn't even it. It's all the days before that to even get you to start. Like, so when you're talking about your DNFs, like, I mean, you DNF that day, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, everybody, I guess maybe not everyone, but everyone I know has had runs like where they had, a 20 miler scheduled for a Saturday, and like all I could do was 15. And that, I mean, technically that's a DNF too, but
that is a great call out, because I have had far more of those.
Yeah. And then you expect your race days to all of a sudden be perfect. It just doesn't work that way, which I think we all know that in our heads, but like I don't even know if it's hard. I don't even know what the running thing is, but there's a emotional part of you that just, it's harder to accept. Yeah. Especially that day and at that time. So, I mean, like, but if you talk about your DNFs like in races, I mean, for me, I've had way more just on like a Saturday that no one even knows about. Like it's not on my, it's nowhere, but I know it, and it definitely still, that bothers me, but it's sometimes hard because you're like, especially when it's, I mean, there's been times where I, been running like 20, 24 miles, and then all of a sudden one day, like 10 miles seems like impossible. And I don't know why. Like I didn't do anything different. I didn't do anything, quote, wrong, and it just doesn't work. So anyway, there's just a lot. I think running teaches you a lot of things if you're like willing to listen. So I think that's another reason that it's a great sport.
I think that is so well said, and to start to embrace the suck out of those moments when it doesn't work is such a great skill, and to realize this happens all the time, and this is just a moment that I kind of got to get through. So that 40-mile training run that I did on the Katy a couple weeks ago, it was so sluggish, and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna finish this Katy trail race coming up. I can't even do 40 miles. Like, I'm struggling with it because I had planned to do 50 that day, and I only ended up doing 40. And
I'm glad that, if Todd can say that, then I can definitely say that. So that makes me feel, not that I didn't already know that people think like that, but there's other people like that, but that just makes me feel better too, that I'm not the only one.
Yeah, well, and the key thing out of that is the processing I had to go through was, this wasn't a test to see if I was ready. This was training.
Yeah.
And the fact that it sucked helped me better prepare for when it's going to suck during the race, and help me get through it at that point. And so it's good to be able to get that. So to realize those moments are going to happen and embrace them when they do. That's well said, Clint.
And I think it also prepares you when life's going to suck, because life's going to suck too.
Right.
And it prepares you for that as well. So.
And you're like, ain't no big deal.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
No, that's a perfect point to end on, man. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Todd, for coming, and thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.